Yo. Just come back from the sauna, and while I was in there, I was thinking over the concept of the disconnect between your head, what you think, and what you know, and the way that a situation or a person and a feeling can make you feel, and how when there's a disconnect, that's when things start to fuck up. And I just wanted to make a video going through the things that I wasn't necessarily thinking it. It was just stuff that I was piecing together. And I thought it was pretty interesting because, like, let's start with relationships, because I feel like relationships are a good place to start because there's easy comparisons. So, like, let's say you're in a relationship with somebody and you're not happy with them, you know? Fundamentally, you don't feel good around them enough of the time because, nobody's perfect, blah, blah, blah. Everybody has bad days, people have bad seasons. Um, but I think when you are in a situation and they're attractive, or they've got really good parents, or you have a good time in between the sheets, they've got a lot of money, or it's convenient, or you've been together through so much and it would not make sense to leave now. It's all stuff that we perceive and we think, and it's one of the things that are important. And I'm not saying that any of those stuff are bad in any way, but when you're around somebody and that they just, maybe it's just the fact that you're not fulfilled by the relationship, or they talk to you a little bit like shit, or they put you down, or that they don't take care of themselves in the way that you find really important. And maybe they did at the start of the relationship, as most people do, but then things slowly over time dwindled, and you maybe have mentioned it a few times, or it could even be like they might lean on you all the time for everything, or they might never lean on you for anything, and they're super, super independent, and you don't feel like you can support them. You don't feel like you relate with them. You don't feel like they open and they're vulnerable, and you're lacking that in your relationship. All of those things will make, all of those things could potentially make you feel like that relationship isn't the type of relationship that you want to be in. And I think sometimes, like, and from my experience, I've been in situations and relationships, and you can apply this to like work, to friends, to like places that you live, and what your housemates are like. You could apply it to a lot of different areas. And I think ultimately, when you feel like something isn't working, when your body, and this is what I'm trying to get at, is when you feel something isn't right, that is your body, that is your hormonal system, that is nature's way of telling you that this is not good. But what the brain wants to try and do is to stay in a situation that it knows. So it will always try and look for reasons to stay in situations that will keep it the same, because to your brain, evolutionarily speaking, change could equal, not getting food, not having mates, not being in shelter, not being in the right social group, or not being in your tribe, which ultimately can lead to death. So it's kind of crazy that we have this brain that wants to keep us in these situations that actually, when you lean into how you feel, are terrible for us. Now, going into like work and things like that, it's very easy to see how this can play out in work, because you might be in a bit of a situation where you need an income. You don't really care what income it is, because you need a job. So you go out and get a job, you get the first job you can find that pays well, and then after you've been there for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, you feel like this job is draining you, you know? You don't have a routine, you don't feel fulfilled, you're not working on anything that's like stimulating and challenging in the right ways. It could be monotonous, you could have got a horrendous amount of stress, your sleep schedule could be out of whack, and all of those things are absolutely going to play havoc with so many different systems in your body. But in your mind, by looking for another job, that's risky, because what happens if the job security isn't as good, or what about if it's even worse, or maybe I might have to make sacrifices, and I'm not going to get to see this person at work, and that free food that we get on Fridays, or and your brain starts to come up with all of these reasons why changing is dangerous. Whereas I feel like the best decisions that I've ever made is when I've been in that situation, is when I flipped it on its head, in terms of, well, and because it's crazy, because I remember once I was sat in a job, and I was like, give me a sign, I was like praying, like, I need a sign, I need something to tell me if this job is correct or not. And then I caught myself, and I was like, motherfucker, the fact that you are asking for a sign is the sign. You aren't listening to the stress, you're not listening to the overwhelm, you're not listening to the fact that every time you are going to this place, you look for a reason not to go to this place. And I think that, you can start and open up conversations about like habits and routine, about scarcity, about insecurity, lack of confidence, not trusting that things will be okay. And there's a slice of this of like, you need to make sure that, you're going to be all right, organize a job before you leave. If you've got bills and stuff like that, then, you can be practical about it. But I do think that just understanding that like this concept exists, and if you are in a situation where you feel like something needs to change, but you kind of don't know where to start, it's a very good idea to start and list the specifics, because I've been in this situation, and realized that rather than having to change the entirety of it, I can just tweak it. So, can you get slightly better hours at work? Do you need to start and put a date night in? Because it turns out your partner's actually beautiful. It's just you're both in a routine, and you're not spending any time together that's intimate, in terms of like just one-on-one time, apart from when you come home from work. So then all of a sudden, this amazing connection that you guys had when you started the relationship just doesn't exist anymore, because you're not making time for it. It might not necessarily be that you need to leave the person, but you need to start and communicate more. You need to, ask them, have you noticed this? And then they're like, holy shit, yeah, I was thinking this too, but I just thought you were busy and you were tired. And then you're like, well, I thought you were busy and you were tired, so I didn't want to say anything to you and add more into your day. And it can sometimes just be as simple as something like that. Finding or experimenting and playing with what could this look like if it was a little bit better, if we were a little bit happier, if we wanted to play a little bit more. In terms of work, it could be, how could this look if my hours were a little bit more routined, or if I knew that I was going to have this day off every week, or there's this person at work that I really, really struggle working with. Can I just do my best to move away from that person as often as I could? Can I work for the same company but look at working in a different department? Or is it time to actually try and move up? Or is this the right company to work for, but I really love this industry? There's so many different seats inside of the ballpark, in terms of listening to the body, but also practically, logically wanting to stay in some kind of a routine, and make sure that you don't rock the boat too much, because I understand that you can't just be like, right, I'm leaving my job, bye, right, I'm getting divorced, see you later. There's a lot more that goes into it than that. But honestly, I do feel that understanding that the brain will want us to stay in a situation, even if it's like a horrendous situation, because it's more afraid of uncertainty than it is of the certainty of being in a bad situation, you know? And it's a crazy thing that our brains do, but that's how we evolved and how we survived and how we, you know, thrived in a lot of different environments. So I think it's really important to just bring it back to the fact of understanding that when your brain, in terms of what it can see, how it feels in terms of security, routine, habits, when that is trying to tell you that the situation that you're in is good, but your body, your feelings, your emotions, your energy levels, you know, like I've been fucking depressed, like seriously depressed before, and it turned out all I needed to do was move house. I just needed to leave the energy that was in the house that I was living in, because I felt like I was being judged. I felt like I was being watched. I didn't feel like I could relax. You know, things weren't like, people weren't doing their part in terms of like keeping the house clean. So then, you know, you end up in a situation where all I needed to do to completely change my entire outlook on life was just move house. And like, it's really not that big of a deal, like, because I was renting, you know. So I think just isolating as much as you can what you could potentially do to make the tweaks. And remember, it's like I always try to think about, it's making a 1% improvement rather than completely looking at a different chart, you know? Like, if I can if I can take responsibility for doing something that's going to improve my situation, even by 1%, and it's kind of something that's pretty easy to do, like not seeing this person at work, or regulating your sleep times, or asking a question to your boss if you can start at the same time every day, or having a conversation with your partner about, are you feeling this way? They're free tools. You just need to understand that it's something that you can do, and listen to the body. I think ultimately most problems come in this type of world when the body tells us through stress, through anxiety, through feeling low mood, wanting to avoid things, and we try and push through that thinking that it's the correct thing to do, but just because of social norms, or you know, what are other people going to think, or you know, being afraid of change, where the best things usually come from leaning into those feelings. It sucks, it's horrible, it doesn't feel good in the moment, but that's ultimately the way that it gets resolved, is getting down to the root of it, and then can we actually make a change, rather than just dealing with all of this pain ultimately, rather than just accepting that it's painful, and then going to, you know, potentially going to external sources to soothe. Is, can we look at actually fixing the cause? And usually we can. And if we can't fix it, we can improve it. And even an improvement, you will notice a difference. So yeah, I just wanted to share that, because there's been so many times in life where I've gone through that process, and I don't think I ever actually fully realized that was the process that I was going through. So yeah, it was just cool to get it out, and hopefully somebody will be able to take it and apply it into a multitude of situations. That'd be really cool. So yeah,